Hey, today I have Brooke Budke on, and she is no stranger to the podcast. People loved her the last time she was on. We're talking about customer acquisition, lead magnets for franchisees and franchisors, converting those leads into paying customers. We gave and demonstrated the playbook on this. At the end, you will be dying to download the thing that she offered at some point during this podcast. I hope you love it as much as I did.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Van Horn.
Hey, Brooke, welcome back.
Thanks. It's good to be here. There's been a lot of buzz.
Man, I tell you, after we did our podcast last time, the first podcast, I had so many people reaching out, and you were sharing how people were reaching out to you. And I think more people even reached out to you because obviously they heard how stinking smart you are and how good you are at all this marketing stuff. So what kind of feedback did you hear?
Easily the biggest chain of events came from me being on the podcast with you, Erik, of in terms of a positive momentum for our brand. We had anywhere from 20 to 30 different brands reach out. And I would say your audience, number one, is wildly invested in the content that you put out, which is impressive. But two, there was one specific tip that I shared that at least a dozen people said they took it, they implemented it, and they saw immediate results the next week. And it was the tip. If you haven't listened to the podcast, go back and listen to it. But I'll just give it again. It's if you're going into the community and you have an enter to win contest and you have a first place winner, to make every other name on the list a second place winner, and you call every one of them and say, congratulations, you won second place. You give them a lower tiered offer. They feel like they won. They're more invested in the brand. I had people reaching out saying, I had $7,000 of immediate revenue in our open locations by doing that because we were selling a service. I had people say we had 20 new leads and customers the next week from the one single tip. And so it's interesting. I learned a lot, even just being on your podcast, was number one, the audience is rich. Everybody wants to know the play. Just give me different things to put in place, and people will work really hard. But number two, it's this lack of just tangible information that is a very tactical tip you can apply, see immediate impact, and do it over and over and over again. And that's really the blueprint of franchising in general. So it was fun to be on the podcast. I'm pumped to be back. We're going to do it again. Give the power to the people. That's the name of the game.
I love it. Let's have this one just be action-packed with tips, practical, some strategy, but I think that's what franchisors and franchisees really want. I think both franchisees and franchisors are going to get value out of today's episode. I get a lot of different emails. I delete a ton of emails every day. I get subscribed to people's email newsletter, and I unsubscribe all the time. Whenever I get your email newsletter, I read it. And I even sent you a message. I'm like, this is fantastic. Yeah. And I know you have some really cool things that you are going to be launching that franchisors will really want to learn about. So why don't you share with how can people get on your newsletter?
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment, because you are a content guy and you understand, even just the depth of developing content and putting it out and the amount of time it takes. But we have a newsletter called The Sauce, and it's really that. It's giving you the secret sauce in franchise marketing, which is why I think the Franchise Secrets listeners love it, because you're giving people secrets, and it's the same, only it's specific to marketing. So in it, I share a tip myself called Tea with BB, where I say, here's what I would think about. Here's what I would do if I were you running a brand. Here's a tip to apply to the leadership level of your business. Second is from Hallie, who is our culture shock guru, understands the consumer. And she gives tips on how TikTok is replacing Google and for search, and how you should stop investing in SEO, to what the Gen Z customer is doing, to next week we're sharing 10 ways to win in community marketing in that section. I think she gave one last week, or a couple weeks ago, Erik, that you said landed with you, and it's something you've seen, is that people today are following brand founders more than they're following brands. And so the tip really there is like, if you're a founder of a franchise brand, it's time for you to get in front of the camera. Like we meet with a lot of people that say, oh, that's not me and that's not my style. And that's okay. But somebody does need to be the face of the brand, because people are following people today versus just brands and narratives that are being pumped out by ad agencies. So telling your personal story is definitely important. But the newsletter gives my insight, Hallie's insight, moves that our brands are making that are important for other brands to make. And then we also share just quick links. And so I love that you've seen value in it. We're actually dropping a tremendous free resource for grand opening, giving people the formula we use for grand opening guides. And that really is the same thing you're doing here on this podcast, is saying, if you have people that can work really hard and understand the culture and want to win inside of your business, but they don't know where to start, just take this list and use it as the checklist to say, here's what needs to go in our grand opening training. And even just use it as, a kickstart to that. And so I'm happy that you see value in it. You can go to themomentumbrands.com and sign up for the sauce. That way, anybody that wants it, we're giving away as much information as we can for franchise marketing.
So was this just a pitch on a newsletter that we just did? Yes, it was, because I believe in Brooke and the newsletter. And this is like, people listen. I don't let people do that very often, but I believe in you. I believe in this newsletter. And this is also an example for brands or if you have a franchise out there, like, create something that your audience finds useful. And I think newsletters are, it's something that you should be thinking about, especially as a franchise brand. You probably should have a newsletter. Maybe it's about the industry. Maybe it's about just your franchise. Maybe something that just goes out to your franchisees, goes out to the wider community, industry reports. You can give something valuable to the people that you want to attract. Maybe it's franchise buyers that you want to attract. Maybe it's customers for your franchisees. But if you as a franchisor can put together a really good newsletter with lead magnets or something that people find valuable, like she's like, hey, we're releasing this new thing, whatever that new thing is for you as a franchisor, to attract franchisees or to help your franchisees get more customers, like, that's something that I think all franchisors should be considering. There's a number of really good newsletters out there, and there's ways to distribute it. Like Beehive is a newsletter like platform, and there's different platforms out there. But if you want an example of what a good newsletter looks like, check out her newsletter. So what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think the thing you hit on that was one of the most powerful things every franchise brand should know is, if you give away free, valuable content, they will pay you for the product or service that you are delivering at a higher value, because they think you are investing in them first. And especially Gen Z, if you look at buying demographics and trends, the Gen Z generation does not go for a steep discount. That is not how they buy. It's not how they value their money. And like, if you are a brand that is attracting Gen Z and you are wanting to do a pre-sale and we're like, we'll do it half off, that doesn't attract them as much as it does a brand with culture, that is a passionate founder, that is giving away free value and adding to their life and creating community. Like, the Gen Z is the highest buying demographic right now in the consumers, and it is the most misunderstood. And so if you even first look at understanding, like, if you even have a friend that offers you value in your life, you're going to be more invested in that friendship than one that just constantly is asking for things. And it's the same thing in business. And as a franchisor, we work on even building infrastructure for training resources for franchise brands and marketing. If you don't have a monthly newsletter going out to your franchisees of things that are going on inside of the business and tools and resources they need to be using, and the next play for the next month, you're missing it. And that is a very common thing where it's like, gosh, we have all these moving parts and we have these things that are great. And you say, now, how are you communicating them and how often to your franchise system? That's one of the biggest missing links in franchise marketing, because it's not just as good as, hey, we have great ads. It's also, how often are you investing in talking to your digital vendors? And are you giving them the play in advance of the franchisee so they're primed and ready, so when the franchisee calls them, they don't look silly? Then are you also telling the franchisee how they need to be investing every single month in advance of the month starting So they can plan, like the monthly newsletter to your franchise system is also something that would create high value in the franchisees and respect. That goes a long way because then they don't feel like they're an afterthought also. So consumers love newsletters, but franchisees do too.
Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are two really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisee and you want to be around a community of successful Zs and other brands and in other industries, this is why I created the Franchisee Mastermind. If you want access to the best single and multi-unit owners to know what they're doing, or if you want to be around other multi-brand owners, then you'll want to check out my Franchisee Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections, to each other. They want a shortcut success, both short-term and long-term. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. There are companies out there that have, not franchise companies, just companies out there that have internal newsletters, like the founders saying stuff, and it's a newsletter. Maybe it's a weekly newsletter. Some companies that I know do a weekly newsletter. Some of it's monthly, but there's a newsletter that they have that goes out to their staff and their team members. So we weren't even going to talk about newsletters, but once we started this, I'm like, ooh, this might be a topic, as franchisors probably have not really thought about this, having a good newsletter to their own franchisees and a really good newsletter to the consumers. So it can just build an email list. I mean, how valuable are email lists? So you've got followers on social, like social media, you have followers, but you don't own that. Like Facebook can take that away in a second, or Meta or Instagram or X, whatever it is. But if you have their email list, that's probably more valuable than having a bigger following on social. Would you agree with that? Like, let's talk about email lists for a minute.
Yes. In fact, it's one of my biggest tips that I teach in general is when you think about real estate, you can own a house or you can rent a house. If you rent a house, the landlord can come in and say, sorry, we're selling this house. Up, it's foreclosed. Up, we're getting rid of it. Up, you don't work anymore as a renter. They can get rid of you at any time. That is TikTok potentially is going under. That is Instagram changes their algorithms daily. That is Facebook. That is LinkedIn. All of those is building your house on rented land. And I'm not saying not to do it, because I do think it's very important to build an online audience and a community. However, if you do not own your property, which is a guest list and a lead list and an email list, you are building your house on rented property. And anyone could tell you at any time, hey, sorry, it's gone. You know, when all the news came out that TikTok was going to be forced to shut down this fall, and people were like, but it's built my entire brand. Well, you better have a lead magnet on TikTok that's getting them into an email funnel so that you can own an email list, because that is one of the biggest missed opportunities, is teaching a brand and understanding that you need to own the data. You need to own the guest list, a name, an email, a phone number, a contact method. So in terms of that, I'm going to give you two different examples of brands that we've helped support email list nurturing. So Hopin is a high-tech tap room. We curated, and here's let me go high level for a minute. The 20,000 foot view is that you have to have a content strategy. Email is just one lever. If you have a content strategy and an annual marketing plan for the next 6 months that says, I know these trends and I'm going to talk about these topics over the next 6 months, you back into what you say on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, email, text, phone calls, lead scripts. All of those are tactics. But if you don't first start with the content strategy, that's where you're really missing the bigger picture. So like Hopin is the tap room. Well, the founder is, his name is Rich. So we created this concept of the Rich Reserve. Okay, so it's like a nice reserve bottle of whiskey. They're a bar. It was branded to go along with that. And we say, now, if we could say, this is what he needs to say on LinkedIn, this message should be used then in a newsletter to a lead to a franchise candidate who's in the pipeline. This is how it's serve to the franchisee so they know and understand who their founder is more. This is how it needs to appear on the website. Then you take pieces of it and use it as quotes on Instagram or Facebook. And it's all based on the concept of branding a content strategy on a founder. Okay, so that's like a very specific example. A second one is we have a nanny concept that we're working with, and her marketing training, we've implemented a monthly webinar for her, and we named it Baby Steps because they're in the nanny business and they help babies every day. But guess what? Franchising and parenting is very similar. So we want to give franchisees baby steps, and her entire newsletter and messaging and positioning for her franchisees is like, let me just give you the baby steps that you need to do for the next 2 months. So we break it down and we say, here's what the plan is for August and September. You don't say, here it is in December. You say, here's what's happening 15 days from now and 45 days from now. So even the chain of, number one, branding your communication. At Title, we called it the hook because, we had a jab, cross, hook, uppercut. We're like, here's the hook on your business. Like, I think it's very important to brand what you do in your newsletters, but two, to use the content strategy. Like, if you have somebody creating content, it needs to be used everywhere because somebody needs to hear a mission at least 7 times before they understand it. So if you're telling a franchisee at the end of every newsletter, you end it with the mission of the company. So they see it and they understand that it's important every single time. When you meet with a customer, you do the same thing. Repetition is the reason why brands grow, because what you recognize gets repeated. And if you recognize certain behaviors every single month, the franchisees will repeat that. Long-winded answer for a newsletter.
That's good. So how should franchisors and franchisees be thinking about a consumer newsletter, capturing emails for the bigger newsletter? Because you got franchisees that want to have those email addresses for themselves, and a franchisor might want to have a bigger list that is consistent. You want to be, one of the things with newsletters and emails, you want to be consistently emailing that list. So, because that list is like, that's an active living thing, and you're going to get dinged on deliverability if it's not very active and you have a lot of unopens. And, there's different things that impact deliverability rates on emails. And so you want to have somebody smart doing that and sending that and managing that list. But how does a franchisor go about building a big list? Or should a franchisor just give local franchisees the content to have their own little list?
I think there's 2 sides to that coin, pros and cons, right? So if you look at, does the franchisor need to build a lead list of consumers? I think the franchisor really is best served to build a lead list for FranDev, and that the franchisees need to be responsible for lead list building at the local level, because then the franchisor inadvertently becomes responsible for lead gen and lead flow and acquisition, and it just gets messy. So if the franchisees are responsible for lead gen and guest list capture, email list capture, the question then is, how does the franchisor best support them? And in most cases, it's by selecting an email service provider, and you have one single source of truth. And in that, then your team would go in and create templates. So the newsletter template would be in there that has the header image, what the theme would be, the member of the month, if you're in fitness, or if you're in the bar, the drink of the week, whatever that is. And you have the format in there. So the franchisee just has to go in and fill in the specifics. So then you have brand continuity through an email service provider. You have the tools and templates that are built, but the franchisee still has the power to customize it. The franchisee then also still owns the responsibility of sending the emails. So they can be done and developed, and they are still not executed if they're not sent. And that really is based on the win-loss record of the franchisees. And I think it does still need to be responsible at the local level for sending that. So I think there are different guest list creations. I know there are some brands that have like a direct-to-consumer offer as well. And so there could be a guest list at the franchisor level. And in that case too, you could see like the best way to nurture them based on zip code or the brand. But in general, I think providing the tools that are well branded and crafted, and also saying like, this is where we're going, like not just giving them the tool, but saying the campaigns and the messaging and the content strategy. So they're also not in the dark on what to say and do, even if they have the tool.
You mentioned franchisors should be developing an email list for franchise candidates. And I think a lot of franchisors are not really nurturing that list or even creating a really good list because they don't have a real good lead magnet. So talk about, from a franchise development standpoint, what are maybe some good lead magnets that a franchisor should be thinking about, and also throw in some really bad ones.
Well, really bad ones would be not doing anything in general, not
Nothing.
understanding the
Sign up.
power of email
Sign up.
marketing.
Call, like, hey, the call to action is give me all this information about you, and we will set up a call to interrogate you, or asking for something real high level. When you're building that list, you want something that they should be getting something for. They probably don't want a Zoom meeting or a phone call or commit to something. They probably want access to some information so then they can decide to have that phone call or have a higher level call to action at some point. So yeah, doing nothing or asking for a high call to action is not good. What else is not good?
Well, right. And so, yeah, so I would say if you look at the organic lead gen side of franchise development, so that'd be basically anything outside of an FSO or a broker. In general, when you think of content, again, you have your website, your LinkedIn, your email, your ad sets, like any press that you're doing, press releases. So all of these things are going to be telling different stories. And if you do have a lead magnet, you also want to tell them in all of those vehicles, not just in one place on a website. And I also recommend that you change them regularly. So like once a quarter, if you change out what that lead magnet is, so somebody could still come back and 6 months later be interested and in the pipeline because they have a different offer. Now on the consumer side, it's relatively easy. Like you could say like get our, in January, get our 10 recipes for mocktails if you're doing dry January, right? Like that's an easy lead magnet to do because it's based on what the consumer wants. And FranDev, what's interesting is it could be as simple as like download our franchise fact sheet, and you give them a branded information of the founder, when it was opened, the company mission, which territories you're interested in, like even just a fact sheet of information that is relevant to the stage that they're at is a great download initially. Because if you look at otherwise, they're spending time on the website, they fill out information, they're going to get a text, email, or phone call from a lead, processor usually. One of my other favorite things is like, hey, spend 30 minutes doing a live webinar with our founder or president. Like sign up to get, to join in and do these free webinars where they just get to meet and know the founder or president or CEO. And it's kind of like an open office hour, but it lets people have like a casual non-sales funnel. Like I want to meet the team behind the team. And it's great if it's a founder or a president or a CEO, because those people would usually be met later in the process. So even doing it once a month where it's like, hey, this month, join Erik on Fridays at noon. We'll be having a happy hour, your drink of choice, and get to know our founder and what's special about our brand. So like that even is a unique lead magnet where it gives them something else to sign up for versus just to be signed up to be in the funnel for, buying a franchise. But in large, I would say like franchise brands normally create broker one pagers or like a 2-minute drill, but those can be versioned for the public. And you have a franchise fact sheet that they can download, or people love lists, like get our 10 facts on what's going on in X industry, whatever industry you're in. Get the 10 reasons why pets are the hottest industry in 2025, whatever that is. And you give them that list, and then they read it and they're like, oh, that is true. Wait, I do think that. Okay, I see that. And then they're more primed even in the funnel. So lead magnets can be very useful. And I also recommend you have a normal sales process and offer, and then you occasionally use a lead magnet to then spike the lead acquisition. In FranDev, I would do it in Q4. I would actually want to see a spike in your lead funnel prior to selling season versus everyone's like, we need to be ready to go for January. My advice is that you start going hard in September and October, and your messaging and positioning for franchise development selling, because content is the long game. It's not the short game. Like brokers, FSOs, ads, like you can see those working as they work. But if you are developing newsletters and LinkedIn content and blog content and press content, that's the long game. So if you're not doing it now, you're behind for January. And I know that's hard to hear, but it does take time to generate.
Because like these are not leads that necessarily are ready to talk right now. They're not they're not ready to buy. They're not ready to engage. And you're seeding that out there, and they're seeing you on a podcast. They see you here, and all of a sudden they're on your email list. So January does roll around. Now you have 100 people on your list that are halfway serious candidates, and 10 of them are serious, and there's 5 buyers in there. You wouldn't have had those if you hadn't seeded with really good content and a really good lead magnet, and weren't just asking for a phone call. You were giving them something, giving them value, and they were, you email a podcast that you were on as kind of a nurturing campaign. So a good lead magnet, good nurturing campaign, and then they can say, yes, today I'm ready for that phone call with, your lead qualifier or whoever it is. So that's really good advice. Oh my gosh, we are about out of time. What are we doing? You had something else to say. Go.
I was going to say,
I'm serious.
Okay, I want to hit on grand opening. I know. We can vibe. It's good. That's why it works. So grand opening lead magnets are critical. Okay, so I just want to bring it back to grand opening. We opened with like tangible tips for grand opening.
The reason we're bringing it back to grand opening is because that was like one of the original big things that we were going to talk about today, but I took us way off course. We will do a bigger one on grand opening sooner than later, but I want you to talk about the grand opening lead magnet.
Yeah. So number one, like understanding your audience and where they go and who they are, your primary and secondary audience is so critical in grand opening, and starting the wheel 90 days prior. And this is even true if you don't have a brick and mortar, because oftentimes we get asked the question, like, when do I start marketing if we don't have an actual ribbon cutting? You still do services coming soon. You still start to get the awareness out, because again, the amount of times people need to see you over and over and over. So when it comes to lead generation and guest list building and grand opening, one of my favorite tips is building the street team. And the street team is somebody, as an example, if you have a young demographic, let's just use Gen Z as a demographic, to create and brand a name for your street team. I'll use Hoppin as an example because we just launched this. We developed their street team called the Hop Heads. Okay, so they're going into the market. It's modeled off of Red Bull and Jimmy John's. And here's why. Because their demographic is a college student. Their core buying demographic needs to be in the bar 2 to 3 times a week. Not once a week, but 2 to 3 times a week. So we want to develop that behavior. We want to bring the product to the people. So in modeling Red Bull and Jimmy John's, Red Bull, when they initially started, before they came into the marketplace, they had college ambassadors with backpacks on. Red Bulls give you wings, and they went sampling out into all of the college communities. And then you saw the little like FJ Cruisers or whatever they were, the little cars with the Red Bull on top. And then they'd bring the cars into use, and they like went so hard on community marketing. And now they're a global brand with sponsored sports teams and like one of the biggest in like action sports. They started small by going to the people and going to the outliers, if you've read that book, which are college students, to say, we're going to bring the product and sample it. And today, Red Bull is a Kleenex. If you go into the bar, they say, can I get a Red Bull vodka? They don't say, can I get a Monster vodka? Can I get a whatever off-brand vodka? No, they say, can I get a Red Bull vodka? Like you say, can I have a Kleenex, not a tissue? Okay, so they branded that entire energy drink. Now, what Jimmy John's did was they went into college markets similarly for their real estate strategy. So they said, we're going to start first in the college markets. And when they had their hottest shift, it was from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. And their 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift actually funded their entire business from the 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. because they knew who their audience was. So these franchisees' success and profitability were based on picking great employees who were going to work the night shift, which was 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. And they had the freaky fast subs for the college students who were starving after going out. Okay, so same demographic said differently. Hoppin is a bar. So we said, let's create Hop Heads, and their community marketing. They're going to go into the tailgates, the apartments where these people live. They're going to have happy hours. They're going to play beer pong. They're going to have a spin to win. They're going to play bags. Everything is going to be branded. And then there's going to be prizes with that. And to get the prize, you have to give them your name, email, phone number. But you make it really, really fun, and you make it so enticing because it's adding value to their life. You're not asking them for anything they don't freely give you because they're having so much fun with the college students who are the hotbeds in the community doing the things they love to do. And on the bottom of every single little cup, it has a prize, $20 off, $5 off, enter to win 500, you and 10 guests to our Founders Club. And every shot they make, they can unlock a prize. They're going to give you their name and phone number. And so if you make it so easy to capture the audience, you're going to have raving fans even before you open. And so like having a street team that is branded is so important. And that will build a better lead list for you than any ad will every time. Because I have people call me and say, how did you open a title with north of 500 pre-sold members? Okay. It was in the middle of Ohio in winter, and he just went where the people were. He went to the malls. He did pop-up workouts at apartments. He went into the community. He probably had a $500 ad campaign running, like peanuts being spent in digital dollars. And when you go into the community and into the people, it really makes a big difference. So lead list building for grand opening is as simple as coming up with a creative idea that is on brand and doing something that your audience wants to do. And then they will give you their name and information. And then you call them all up and you say, hey, you won. Okay, remember, this is when you're going to redeem it at our Founders Club, at our VIP party, at the grand opening. Until then, here's the second offer. And you just engage them. But then that's when you send them the emails and the text and the here's what's coming up after they've already had a great time with you. And then they're like hyped for your grand opening. So it is about, I think marketing is still highly creative, but it is also strategic of understanding really what your audience needs and wants.
So what's your latest lead magnet?
I love talking about value. How do you add more value to people? So what we are doing is we are giving away our grand opening formula for how we write and curate a grand opening guide. Most of the time when I speak to brands, they say, I don't know where to start. I will do what you tell me to do. I just don't know where to start. And so I said, why don't we just tell them where to start? There is no harm in that for anyone. There is all goodness to be shared. And we are giving away the list of what to include in the brand category and your infrastructure category and your community marketing and your grand opening and your digital and your social and your referrals and in the training and implementation. And I'm just listing out, here are the subcategories that you need to have. If you don't have an outline for what to put in your grand opening training, these are the things you need to put in place. And once you sign up for that, the second email you're going to get is saying, you still don't know where to start? Here's our process of determining where you start. And we give you the process from ranking them, nice to have, future have, must have. It's a really simple process you could do even with your existing. If you're building a website, you get out sticky notes and you say nice to have, must have, future have. You put them on the wall. And it is so clear to see what is your must-have items. And then the nice to have, you do in 90 days. And then the future have, you say, great, we're going to target that for 2025. But then the list isn't overwhelming. It's really simple. But if you first start with, what do I need to have? And then you categorize them. What is a must-have? What is a nice to have? What is a need to have? What is a future have? Then your list becomes really small. And you can execute half a dozen things for your franchisees and get them in place. And then another half dozen in 3 months and another half dozen after that. And then they're like, this franchise brand is doing everything because you're giving them the baby steps of the success formula. So that's our current lead magnet. We have another one coming out in the fall for franchise development. I recommend doing them quarterly based on what's hot and relevant for, what brands need, what our consumer needs. And our consumer is a brand CEO, founder, or president. So today it's really just giving the formula. And then we have a mastermind class that is getting ready to start in Q4. And it is grand opening specific. And it is going to be really fun, unique, and different. It's limited to 6 brands per each of the classes. And they will have one live training with myself and Hallie, grand opening, baby steps over the course of 12 months. You'll get the one call, an accountability partner. You'll get matched. You and I get matched. We have homework we have to do every month. We have to communicate with each other. You submit the homework, and the winner every month gets a free resource from us, like a new store opening checklist, a responsibility matrix, a grand opening guide template, whatever that is, so then they can implement it in their business. So we're also like gamifying the success blueprint with the franchise brand, and we're teaching them how to fish versus saying, let us do it for you. So really it's like, again, giving the power to the people to have the intelligence they need to scale their business. And it's in bite-sized forms because the people are busy, they're running brands, and if they could just implement one thing a month, they're still seeing progress and momentum in that. And then they feel so much more relief at the franchisor and franchisee level. So those are our current lead magnets. We're regularly dropping tips every week on the newsletter, as and like what you do with your audience on these podcasts, which is why I love being on it, because your audience loves the information you give them because it's on point and there's a need for it. A big one.
So this podcast was not intended at all to go this way, but what this really was a masterclass on how to give your audience, your customers, your future customers value, and how that leads into paying customers. You just heard her talk about how she's doing this, and she showed you as well. And I let her show you, and then there's people that are right now that have downloaded those guides, those lead magnets, and there's going to be people that that do that. They see the value in that, and then they pay for your grand opening mastermind series, which, by the way, I know the price, and it's a very, very reasonable price for what you get. And it's limited, which is awesome. Like, there's so many things, if you go back and listen to this podcast, that this is the blueprint. This is the playbook on how to build your franchise. I love it. Thanks for coming on.
I love it. Hey, we still need to do one on grand opening.
We're going to book that, and that'll be coming out sooner than later, because that's what we were originally going to talk about. So thanks again.
And I would love to challenge your audience, because I think they're very engaged. Tell us what you want to know about, because you and I could riff about marketing topics all day long. So email me or Erik and say like, hey, I would love to know about X. And we could talk about any other topics too.
That's a great point. I love it. All right, girl. I'll let you go.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.